Well, I would say that terrorism has always been there in the continent, but 9/11 or the event in, the Twin Tower bombings in the US sort of redefined our way of thinking, our way of understanding what terrorism is. It sort of shifted and handed down certain concepts that and some methodologies that we've used over time for the last 20 years, like, for example, the war on terror. The idea that, we had to demonstrate that we were part of, an alliance to go after the enemy that had gone after the superpower. So, and, after 2001, we started seeing, like in 2002, many African countries had to come up with anti-terror legislations or laws. We started seeing structures being created. For example, at the African Union level, we saw the AU Plan of Action for Prevention and Combating Terrorism. Then we also saw the African Union setting up a structure to study and research terrorism that is based in Algiers in 2004. And then subsequently, we started seeing so many other, legislations coming in. We started having structures, for example, the anti-terror units in our forces, both the law enforcement, our police, and also the army. Then we started having this sort of phobia that we have to secure ourselves. Yet it was actually a free world. So the event that happened in the US, very sad. It was many lives, over 3,000 people died. Sort of redefined, how we will live and relate, in years to come. As African countries, we started seeing a lot of securitization of the continent because we never had military bases. So today we have over 20 military bases in the continent. And the idea is to prevent the terror before it gets, across the shores beyond the Pacific. We started seeing more weapons, for example, within the Eastern Horn of Africa, which I think for me was a huge shift. So the idea of, development cooperation tied into security cooperation. I mean, back then aid was just aid, humanitarian investment, like democracy development. But then the very fact that, the Al-Qaeda that had claimed responsibility for the 9/11 had a base and a hub in Sudan. So definitely Africa had to be a spotlight. So the idea, if they had bases there, how do we dissuade? How do we prevent them from inspiring as so many offshoots that would emerge and sort of hit us from any corner? So Africa was seen as a security-centric space, and the idea was to invest in preventing another attack that might emerge, given the fact that Bin Laden had a base and had links with Sudan. And that's why you even saw that Sudan was put on a sanction that has just been negotiated 20 years later by Donald Trump. Yeah, but also prior to 9/11, you remember the twin bombs in East Africa, the US Embassy in Kenya and in Tanzania. So there were all indications that Africa was an epicenter of terrorism and there was need to invest. And remember, 1998 was just 3 years to 2001. So America, all the other world powers learned a lesson that they should have dealt with the problem. So they thought that it was just the problem that stopped in East Africa. Little did we know that those with evil intentions had to go after them in 9/11, which was a huge disaster. And I think fast forward also, in Chad here, I actually survived the 2010, terror attacks. I was just a soccer lover. I was a, Netherlands fan, and many of my colleagues died in that space. So I mean, for me, we need to acknowledge that it's not a Western problem. It's not. It's actually a human problem, that we have to look at it as a collective security problem that requires us to devise ideas and thoughts collectively, not leaving it to the military, not just looking at it as a military solution idea, or it shouldn't be just an issue of the security forces should intervene. But that requires us to look beyond the reactionary mode and understanding what are those issues or what are those grievances, the injustices that might push people to feel they're excluded, and so that those with ill intentions can easily recruit them to cause harm, intentional harm, and target people just because they want to make a political message of either they want to show credibility, they want resources, or they want to destabilize the state, that the state is no longer in charge in terms of authority, they no longer have the capacity to take care of your lives, provide for you, but also importantly, they no longer have your legitimacy, because even when you guarantee their, their existence as a social contract, they can no longer take charge as a state. I mean, they can no longer care for you. That's why, like academically or scholarly, we don't get into that conversation of defining terrorism, simply because we've seen states actually, invoking terrorism in one or the other. I mean, they invoke violence as a tool to shut down political opponents. But what we're looking at is, our panel is looking at those terror groups that have transnational links, that, indiscriminately sort of cause harm to society. They kind of, their consistency to cause state disorder across states, like Al-Shabaab, in Kenya, Al-Shabaab in Ethiopia, and also Somalia. So those are the kind of terror groups we're looking at. And I think for me that's a dangerous pathway that we undertake, which I think we have to call out. The second thing is the idea of the erosion of public faith when it comes to the state having providing their safety. I think we need to acknowledge that terrorism is not something we read about, say, in the news, or we watch over, over TVs or media. It's something that is within our streets. How do we prevent the next attack? How do we look out for who is the next enemy? Collectively, how do we address those issues, the grievances, the underlying socio-political grievances that sort of course, being cautious of human rights? These intentional scares, these intentional forms of violence that are geared towards projecting a given political objective, don't emerge out of any vacuum. It's either we're not responding to the interests of the citizens, they don't see opportunity in the country, they feel that the institutions that are supposed to uphold their constitutional rights are the very institutions that are abusing them and labeling them, or we don't seem to address some of the core issues, the injustices, issues to do with, how do we, for example, avail opportunities for everyone? How do we allow each and everyone to have a dialogue on the future of the country, or where we should be heading as a country? The idea of allowing, for new, fresh ideas to emerge and deliver leadership. I think for me that's ultimately the leadership issue. So if people are collectively involved in creating a safer, a prosperous, and a secure future for themselves, I don't think we'll have any room for those who want to recruit the young minds. If the young minds see hope, if they see their futures in their country, those with ill intentions cannot take advantage of them. So I think we have to invest in changing some of these conditions and some of these grievances. That a given group doesn't feel that they've been historically been marginalized. How do we address political marginalization, economic marginalization? And that requires inclusion. That requires giving hope to the people that you can make it here as an entrepreneur. And I think these are some of the things that we've got to address as a continent. And these are broader conversations. We can't be talking about, like Vision 2063 in the continent, and you're not availing opportunities, and you're not looking at how do we deal with repressive, securitized regimes that might not feel comfortable to include the others in delivering a safer country, but also a safer Africa. These are broad conversations we should be having, and they require having a proactive, a comprehensive approach. Some of these issues have to be immediate, others have to be long-term. It requires us to have a multi-dimensional approach to issues. What is the role of education in saving that young man or young lady who is being swayed via internet? For example, what is the role of society in calling out on fake news? Because that has a huge implication in, because fake news is powerful. Fake news is enduring. It can wreak havoc. For example, why would we keep sharing this video of this sort of young man who is saying that this is how you're going to have to make the improvised explosive device. You know, you can have a nail and all that. What is the role of private companies, you know, telecom companies? So that calls everyone on board beyond just the silo approach of looking at the hard power or the military, the security approach, which is normally reactive. It requires a broader societal approach or broader civil society approach. The family has a role, you know, the religious leaders have a role, everyone, the media has a role in sort of not censor, you know, we cannot keep censor, you know, like being sensational on a given group and a given community. We cannot be giving others a platform and we don't give others a mic. So everyone has a role. So I think for me, what I've argued in the conference is that for us to deal with you know, the scourge of terrorism in the continent, we have to look at, we have to address those underlying socio-political economic conditions, including the respect of human rights and addressing some of these governance deficiencies. You know, and most importantly, we should be able to address, you know, kick out this problem in Africa proactively.